Hello everyone, this is Ukraine today. Loud night in the city of Sochi. Ukrainian drones have attacked military facilities on Russian territory. Putin has ordered the capture of Donbas at any cost. The occupiers suffer colossal losses in human wave assaults. Those who refuse to turn into cannon fodder are subjected to brutal beatings and torture by their own commanders. Epidemic of hepatitis and HIV has struck the Russian army. Reports say HIV cases among Russian soldiers have surged dramatically. Trump and Putin will meet in Alaska. Will the US president sacrifice Ukraine's interest for a Nobel Peace Prize? Peacekeeper Putin again frightens the world with new nuclear weapons. And Xi Jinping seems jealous of Putin over Donald Trump. We will talk about all of this below. My name is Fedor Sholenko and we are starting. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also support us with a comment and indicate the city or country where you are watching us from. This is very important for us and for Ukraine. A new set of Ukrainian sanctions against the Russian military machine. Ukrainian armed forces drones successfully hit a Russian drone production workshop in Kazan, Republic of Tatarstan. The drone reportedly flew more than 1,000 kilometers. Loud nights in the city of Sochi as well. Ukrainian drones attacked military facilities in the showpiece city that Putin once made the showcase of the Russian world, bearing hundreds of billions of rubles here while preparing for the 2014 Olympics. In addition to the mass evacuation of Russians from the beach, the drones halted the operation of the local airport. More than 80 flights were delayed. Passengers slept on the floor, some waiting for depart for more than 12 hours.
Ladies and gentlemen, departing by flight 699 airlines from Sochi to
On the front, while Putin talks about being ready for real negotiations and peace, the occupiers continue their offensive at the front. According to British intelligence, in July, Russia captured around 500 square kilometers of Ukrainian land, about the same area as in June. The intelligence notes that the Russian army has not reduced the number of assault operations. The hottest spot remains eastern Ukraine, especially Donbas, to the northeast and southwest of Pokrovsk. In Sumy region, over the past few weeks, however, Russian troops has had no success. Constant losses and successful counterattacks by Ukrainian soldiers have thwarted Putin's plans to create a buffer zone. The occupiers' advances are achieved at the cost of huge losses in human wave assaults. Those unwilling to turn into cannon fodder are subjected to brutal beatings and torture by their own comrades and commanders. This has become commonplace in the Russian army. Soldiers of the 79th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces shared a video they found on a phone of a mobilized Russian soldiers in the Sumy direction.
Бабки будем отрабатывать. Почему не хотим на штурм идти нам? Ты какого хуя сюда приперся, блядь? Почему не хочешь воевать там? Лёх, блядь, сказал. Лёх, блядь. Ты чё, блядь? А? Чё, воевать не хочешь, блядь, а? Ты какого хуя приперся, блядь? Чё, родину защищать, блядь? Лёх, блядь, сказал. Чё? Смотри на меня, я тебе сказал, блядь. Ебало показал, пидор.
Meanwhile, the human immunodeficiency virus is destroying the Russian army from within. HIV has become a real catastrophe for the Russian occupiers. Cases among soldiers have surged 20-fold. Hepatitis has also spread throughout the Russian army.
It's not just the Ukrainian armed forces that are helping to destroy the occupiers in this war, but also HIV. The disease is decimating Russian soldiers, but you won't hear about it on federal TV channels.
I deliberately failed the military medical commission because I have HIV. I got hepatitis there, and my left kidney isn't working, it's failing. What should I do? Help all of us. Everyone here is without legs.
The only thing uniting us is that tomorrow we're being sent to the front line.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the number of HIV infections among Russian soldiers has increased by 2,000%.
I passed the medical commission at my city's military enlistment office. So it turns out they forged everything. After that, in Nizhny Novgorod, at the Regional Military Enlistment Office, I didn't undergo a medical examination. I just brought the paperwork.
What is causing this sharp increase? First, it's due to unprotected sexual contact among Russian soldiers and drug use. Second, syringes tend to run out very quickly, especially during war. That's why medical staff in field hospitals don't hesitate to reuse disposable syringes multiple times.
During the service itself, it became evident that some individuals unfortunately got infected, because we know from various independent and reliable sources that there were a significant number of wounded, a great many severe injuries, such as limbs being tragically torn off, and naturally, this inevitably leads to very significant and life-threatening blood loss. And so, if a person, for example, is living with HIV, not receiving treatment, and maybe even unaware of their status, and they suffer such an injury, it's possible that this infected blood could have been transmitted to others as well.
The rise in diseases and deaths from the immunodeficiency virus is also directly linked to the Kremlin, which under the guise of protecting traditional values has increased pressure on educational and preventive organizations fighting HIV. The authorities have almost stopped publishing data on HIV. At the same time, the Russian army, which is in a state of prolonged isolation and lacks medical care, has become especially vulnerable.
For example, they started recruiting prisoners with HIV into the army. Actually, probably not into the army itself, but into private military companies. Plus, after the partial mobilization was announced, and also after they started offering such huge sums for signing a contract, some people with HIV joined the service. They decided to hide their HIV status.
Despite statements that people with HIV are not being sent to fight in the war with Ukraine, in reality there are at least hundreds of contract soldiers, mobilized troops and volunteers with this diagnosis on the front lines.
Despite the diagnosis and the medical commission's conclusion of limited fitness, the soldier was transferred to a motorized rifle battalion and later to combat positions.
Conscripts diagnosed with HIV are not accepted into the army. This disease falls under Category D, which means complete exemption from service.
Yes, indeed, there may have been cases when a person at a certain stage of HIV infection was allowed to continue serving in the army if they were diagnosed while already in service. But at the same time, a person with HIV was not allowed into the army in the first place. And here there was also strict control at the entry stage when it was mandatory to provide certificates regarding HIV, the presence of HIV infection, viral hepatitis, and tuberculosis. All of these diseases served as grounds for exemption. But again, after the so-called special military operation began, and after it became necessary to fill the army with new people, so to speak, to replace those who had left, of course, they started to turn a blind eye to this.
From the very beginning of the mobilization in Russia, HIV-positive Russians have been receiving draft notices and continue to receive them to this day. The military enlistment officers are not aware of their current health status. Some volunteers hide it in order to go to war and earn money, while others simply do not know about their diagnoses. At the same time, the Russian Ministry of Defense is concerned about reputational losses.
So, yes, indeed, we cannot say that the HIV epidemic has been overcome as of today. And unfortunately here, I'm afraid officials from the Ministry of Health just want to be overly optimistic.
In 2025, it became known that entire assault battalions were being formed from people with hepatitis and HIV.
Last time, he was there for 7 or 8 months and was constantly on the front line. But back then, he didn't have this diagnosis. He had strength, he could run, and so on. We can't rule out that now they'll gather everyone with diagnoses and throw them onto the front line.
The situation is so bad that these units, even though they undergo training, are deliberately being sent by the Ministry of Defense to be disposed of on the battlefield. Despite their training and the shortage of people due to losses,
I went through the military medical commission and they found I had HIV. They told me to wait for the Central Medical Commission for my discharge. Today, the commander said he's sending me back to the combat zone.
a soldier like that is a risk in war. The infection could spread among other servicemen. But in addition to this, the Russian occupier creates difficulties in providing medical assistance to the wounded and poses a direct threat to medical personnel who are already scarce on the front line. By the end of 2024, the number of infection cases in the Russian Federation's army had increased 20-fold. Since 2022, Putin has been heavily engaged in the war, and the Russian Federation has entered the top 5 countries in the world for new HIV infections, surpassed only by South Africa, Mozambique, Nigeria, and India.
For this government, people are just a resource. For example, a resource to wage war. That's why, on the one hand, they need healthy, strong people, in a fascist sense, you could say. But on the other hand, we also don't know how many people with HIV have been sent to the combat zone. There are absolutely no statistics on this matter.
How often they inject themselves there every day, and how many heroes will come home to have children? We have no idea.
Due to sanctions and lack of funding, a record number of interruptions in antiretroviral therapy medications were reported in 2024. But not only is the Kremlin killing Russians by starving them of essential medications, they are also putting Ukrainians in the occupied territories at risk. There is no reliable data on what is happening with therapy in the occupied territories. Back in 2022, the UN reported that antiretroviral therapy centers in these territories had been shut down. Thanks to the Kremlin's attitude towards serious diseases, the demographic and economic consequences of the outbreak will be felt for decades and may even prove more devastating than the consequences of the invasion of Ukraine.
The planned meeting between Putin and Trump in Alaska. The result of Steve Witkoff's trip to Moscow will be a personal meeting between the US president and the Russian dictator next week on 15 August. The Russian side has confirmed Putin's visit to the US state.
The long-awaited meeting between me, the President of the United States of America, and the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, will take place next Friday, August 15th, аж до 15th, 2025, in the state of Alaska. Details will be published later. Thank you for your attention to this topic.
At White House briefing, Trump said that a peace agreement for the Russia-Ukraine war should involve some exchange of territories. According to the Wall Street Journal, during talks with Witkoff, the Kremlin leader proposed to stop hostilities only if Ukrainian troops withdraw from part of Donetsk region under their control. We hope that for the sake of a Nobel Peace Prize, Donald Trump will not sacrifice Ukraine's interest and will remember international law. President Volodymyr Zelensky responds that Kyiv is ready for a real solution to ensure a just and lasting peace, but Ukrainians will not give their lands to the aggressor.
Volodymyr Zelensky, this war needs to be ended, and it is Russia that must end it. Russia started this war and is dragging it out, ignoring all deadlines. And that is the problem, not anything else. The answer to the Ukrainian territorial question is already in the constitution of Ukraine. No one will or can deviate from this. Ukrainians will not give their land to the occupier.
While Trump seeks compromise, Putin is again using nuclear blackmail. The Kremlin has decided to frighten the world with its nuclear potential, not with the notorious Oreshnik, but with a missile called Burevestnik. There is increased activity at the Novaya Zemlya test range. Russia has closed a large airspace zone.
Russia is preparing new tests for one of its 5 types of so-called wonder weapons. We're talking about the Burevestnik missile, which has been dubbed the Flying Chernobyl in the US. All because of its nuclear engine.
The missile is dangerous because if the reactor is destroyed, if it's shot down, or if it, say, crashes or has an accident, then quite a large area will be contaminated. And no reasonable person wants that. That's why the Americans abandoned this environmentally unfriendly project back then.
Nuclear weapons expert Decker Eveleth has pointed out that the Kremlin is preparing to test its own analog of this weapon. According to him, this is evidenced by increased activity at the Pankovo test site on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago. In addition, the possibility of tests is also indicated by the fact that the United States has sent an Air Force radiation reconnaissance aircraft to Novaya Zemlya. This aircraft is equipped with sensors for monitoring nuclear tests. Later, Newsweek noted that the aircraft took off from the British airbase Mildenhall and circled over the Barents Sea for about 14 hours.
If it explodes, it will contaminate everything around it. That's why as soon as the Russians start talking about planning to test something and begin actively flexing their wings over there, well, immediately some kind of American reconnaissance plane or radiation level monitor is sent to that area, starts circling, and records everything that's happening.
The development of the Burevestnik began in Russia back in 2001, but it was only in 2018 that Putin publicly announced it. He did so with great pomp, claiming that its range was unlimited and its flight path could be unpredictable. During this time, Russia tested the Burevestnik 13 times, and all attempts ended in failure. Although one is actually considered a success, on that occasion, the Russian wonder weapon managed to fly as far as 35 kilometers.
Out of the 13 launches, all were unsuccessful. One launch when the missile flew 35 kilometers in 2 minutes. And this is considered the most successful launch because at that time, They managed to record all the parameters they wanted to capture. There is also a theory that when the major accident happened in Nusek, that this accident was actually connected, this disaster when people died and there was a large radiation release, that it was connected, according to one version, with this Burevestnik missile.
Putin didn't pull the Burevestnik out of his nuclear arsenal for no reason. This is another tool of intimidation.
There is such a stir created around it. Russia is terribly big, terribly powerful. It has a ton of weapons. It has 5,500 nuclear warheads. True, it is unknown in what condition. But apart from Burston, probably no one knows. Next. Trump's ultimatum deadline is approaching, and now something needs to be done. That's why air traffic over Kapustin Yar is being shut down, so that everyone starts thinking about what will be tested there, whether it's the Burevestnik that's going to fly or something else. Then the whole world gets tense. Then they announce that there will be more tests of the Burevestnik missile or something else.
Can the Russians conduct a Burevestnik test? Probably they can. Will it be successful? In Russia, they'll say yes. But as statistics from previous tests show, only the Russians themselves might suffer from this launch.
Historic agreement. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, with Trump's mediation, signed a peace agreement. They said the document opens a new page in relations and ends the 30-year war in the Caucasus. Baku and Yerevan have finally broken free from Moscow's sphere of influence. They would be geostrategic. Putin has lost influence in yet another vital region. Against this backdrop, Xi Jinping offered support to the Russian dictator. China and Russia conducted joint naval exercises in the Sea of Japan, involving destroyers, submarines and supply ships. Xi also called Putin some expert joke. He was introducing him on how to speak with Donald Trump.
Russia and China held another round of joint three-day exercises from August 3rd to 5th. This time they took place in the Sea of Japan, with several ships, aircraft and combat missions. Everything was done on a full scale. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Ukraine and Moscow's international isolation.
These particular exercises cannot truly demonstrate anything of real significance to anyone at all, and they serve absolutely no genuine purpose whatsoever, except perhaps as a kind of elaborate mating dance. Large males come out to face each other, stand impressively, show off their huge fangs and teeth, display how powerful their wings are, and generally try to intimidate one another. They might even shout, click, cackle, or roar. But almost never does it actually come to a fight during this kind of display, these mating dances, because there's simply no point.
The exercise program includes rescue operations for submarines, joint countermeasures against underwater threats, as well as air and missile defense.
There's nothing new about them. I still remember working at RT Channel 25 years ago when we used to show these Russian-Chinese exercises. They were held, I think, every year and sometimes even several times a year, depending on the international situation and whether there was a need to perform another mating dance for someone so that, the planet would look favorably on one performer or another.
Beijing emphasized that these maneuvers are meant to deepen the comprehensive strategic partnership. But is China really interested in a partnership with Russia?
We also need to work on the relationship between Russia and China. Russians and Chinese do not like each other. I don't know if you know this, but the Chinese have already changed their maps of the Far East, adding Chinese names to Russian cities. Because I think they're making it clear that one day they want to reclaim these territories.
China and Russia have been conducting joint naval exercises since 2012. But since the start of the full-scale war, they have intensified their military cooperation.
An alliance is something between equal partners. Today, China and Russia are not equal partners. Today, Russia is in a vassal, completely dependent position with respect to China. Especially when India drops out of Russia's oil trade, only China will be left. So what are we even talking about? What kind of alliance could there be? There can't be any alliance there. Putin's Russia is an apprentice to Xi Jinping. And whatever Xi Jinping says, that's what they will do.
Nevertheless, China remains neutral on the issue of the war against Ukraine. Although judging by their actions, you wouldn't say so.
China acts pragmatically in all situations, and for example, when developing economic cooperation with America, they don't stop to think about what, say, Putin and his circle might think about it. They develop it absolutely calmly. when they can strengthen their political influence and therefore their economy by interacting with some shady characters, global outcasts like the Kims or the Putins, they do that too because it's part of their policy.
Joint military actions by two nuclear powers are not just a signal, but also a potential threat. After all, such exercises can be used as a cover. Or not.
China will never go for a militaristic confrontation with America, because America is one of China's largest trading partners. China is just as dependent on America as America is economically dependent on China. Because if some kind of conflict suddenly breaks out between them, then China would lose about a quarter of its economy, about a quarter of its income, most likely. So in general, there's no need to look for some big hidden threat to Ukraine or to the civilized world in these exercises. That's simply not the case.
Meanwhile, the EU is concerned about China's growing role in supporting Russia's war against Ukraine, and as a result, they intend to push for sanctions against Beijing as well.
Belarus unrecognized President Alexander Lukashenko begged for an interview with an American journalist. Simon Schuster said Lukashenko had been trying for months to talk to a Time magazine reporter, hoping to act as a go-between for Putin and Trump. Did Putin's servant succeed? Judge for yourself.
And that's how it's done. Listen, I said, I gave 50 days.
Yeah, he wants done quickly.
He always has to understand that he could be sent to...
And that's exactly what Putin does. He sends him.
Well, he hasn't sent him yet, but he could.
Schuster said the Belarusian dictator even tried to pay for the interview. He was shocked when told that an interview for a respected outlet cannot be bought. Lukashenko also repeated the false claim that no invasion of Ukraine was launched from Belarus in February 2022. He said Russian troops were merely leaving exercises in Belarus via Kiev.
The zone. They passed through our zone along the old Leningrad-Odessa road, somewhere along there, and entered Ukraine. During this withdrawal, well, it was literally just a few hours. I always say this, you know, why all of a sudden? And the troops were from the eastern district, from the east of Russia. I ask, why did Russian troops go through Kiev to the east of Russia? Why did Putin withdraw them through Kiev to Russia? But that's a question for Zelensky and for Putin.
At the same time, thousands of Russian soldiers are arriving in Belarus for the Zapad 2025 exercises. In 2022, such exercises preceded the full-scale invasion. Are we seeing preparation for new Russian aggression?
The first train carrying Russian troops and equipment has arrived in Belarus. Everything is by the book, loud statements and promises of strong friendship. But what is really behind this latest wave of allied activity?
Today, the military alliance between Russia and Belarus is an essential condition for the further development of our countries. This is of great importance given the current threats. With the start of the special military operation, this became one of the top priorities, said a serviceman of the Russian armed forces.
The Belarusian Ministry of Defense immediately reported preparations have begun for the strategic exercises Zapad 2025, which are scheduled for September. They insist that the maneuvers are supposedly routine and are held every 2 years. But history teaches us it was precisely under the guise of exercises in 2021 that Russia moved its troops to the Ukrainian border and already at the beginning of 2022 launched a full-scale invasion.
The first echelons with military equipment that arrived in Belarus, they can be used both for practicing coordination and for further buildup of strike forces.
And although the official scenario of the exercises is still classified, its direction is obvious. After all, the playbook is the same, the scenario is the same: troop redeployment, creation of a strike force, preparation for future operations, all the things the aggressor used to start the large-scale war with Ukraine.
In this case, coordination between Ukraine and our Western partners is necessary in order to send a signal, I believe, not only to the Russian Federation, but also to Belarus about the inadmissibility of using these exercises as a cover for preparing offensive actions. After all, we understand that the Russians still have the temptation, for example, to open a northern front against Ukraine or to launch a special operation against, say, the Suwałki corridor. Obviously, that would involve Poland, that would involve Lithuania. There are various scenarios.
The key question remains the scale. So far, the official statements mention 12, 13, or 14,000 servicemen. However, according to intelligence from the Baltic states, up to 150,000 troops could be involved in the maneuvers. If these numbers are confirmed, it would be the largest concentration of troops on NATO's eastern flank in recent years.
The Russian Federation and Belarus will downplay the actual number of servicemen participating in these exercises. Therefore, the risks will remain. But let's see to what extent, in this case, the preventive process will actually work. After all, we remember how even Keller himself came to visit Lukashenko. We also remember a number of statements and the current redeployment of those same German Eurofighter jets to Poland, and many other actions involving the redeployment, specifically of servicemen to NATO's eastern flank.
At the same time, other alarming steps are emerging. For example, a new airborne assault brigade is being formed in Belarus. Where do you think? Of course, right at the Ukrainian border. This was announced by the commander of the Belarusian Special Operations Forces, Vadim Denisenko. According to him, the units are being stationed in the Gomel region, north of Chernihiv and Kiev regions.
As of today, this is, so to speak, the most tense direction, which keeps all of us on alert. That's why the decision was made to create a separate airborne assault brigade there. And as of now, we have already begun forming this brigade. One of the battalions has already been formed.
We are talking about the 37th Guards Airborne Assault Brigade. Its formation is part of a large-scale strengthening of the Belarusian army. New artillery and anti-aircraft missile units are also being created. And on top of that, the parliament is discussing rewriting the law on martial law to expand the powers of the president, the Security Council, and the Ministry of Defense.
Currently, Vladimir Putin is heavily relying on several crucial pillars that support his regime and power. The first pillar is the belief that the Ukrainian response is an anomaly and that such resistance will not occur in European countries. The second significant assertion being made is that Article 5 of the NATO-Washington Treaty is, in essence, a complete and utter myth, and that the alliance, in a practical sense, will not be able to provide an adequate or sufficient response to any potential threats or aggressions. And the third crucial pillar is the deeply held belief that China will significantly strengthen the strategic position of the Russian Federation in terms of comprehensive economic and political cooperation and collaboration, because it is beneficial for China to put the United States in a difficult position, and thus, while the US is occupied with Russia and Europe, China will resolve the Taiwan issue.
Without a doubt, the Zapad 2025 exercises are a challenge not only to Ukraine, but to the entire region. Despite the fact that, according to the Ukrainian State Border Guard Service, there are currently no signs of a threat to our country, Kiev is preparing for any outcome, as are its Western allies. Poland has already announced, in response to the actions of Moscow and Minsk, that it will hold its own large-scale exercises, Iron Defender, with the participation of NATO allies. The question now is whether these exercises will remain merely a show of force or become yet another round of escalation. Only time will tell.
To conclude, here is a portion of Russian propagandist nonsense, from presenting Trump as Russia's main enemy to claiming that Russia has created paradise on earth in occupied Ukrainian territories. We have selected the most blatant Kremlin lies.
The past week did not disappoint once again. Reality seems to be competing with itself in absurdity. The events and statements that happened over these days could easily have been scenes from a dark comedy if only they weren't so real. These days, when child rearing is increasingly discussed in the context of psychology and human rights, Father Tkachev suddenly appears with an unexpected pastoral initiative. During one of his broadcasts, he shared a spiritually practical life hack. It turns out you can beat children, but only under one important condition: the family must be complete. Apparently, without both mom and dad together, the belt is not sanctified.
In order for physical punishment to be used at least somewhat properly, a complete family is necessary. A child needs to have an image of both mercy and strictness. If the family is incomplete, then none of this works at all.
Donetsk, once a beautiful Ukrainian city with European ambitions, today looks like a post-apocalyptic art installation. Local residents draw water from puddles not for fun, but out of sheer necessity.
Look at what they've done to people. That they're scooping up water right off the asphalt from a burst storm drain. How far do you have to push people for them to end up like this? It's a nightmare.
On the night of July 31st, the Russian army launched yet another strike on Kyiv. Russian shelling claimed the lives of more than 30 people, including children. The building collapsed onto sleeping families. Blood, concrete, sirens, and somewhere in a warm Russian studio with coffee and a microphone, the propagandist Pankin sits with a satisfied smirk and announces,
"You have to admit, Kyiv got hit and hit hard. All night long videos were spreading through the best Telegram channels."
In Russia, there is disorder, systemic, rotten, and everyday. A state that kills Ukrainian children, women, and men every day is fundamentally incapable of even taking basic care of those living under its own flag. But on the country's main TV channels, not a word about water, drones, or the dead. The main topic, who Zelensky is sleeping with.
He hasn't found a way to overcome his fears. Or rather, he has, but it's a very peculiar one. Friends, you won't believe it, but he sleeps with his aide Yermak in a bunker deep beneath Kyiv. And this isn't some Kremlin fabrication. Vladimir Vladimirovich is smiling. He knows who wrote about it. Journalists from the Financial Times.
In Kuzbas, mobile internet was completely shut down, supposedly to increase security. But the surrealism didn't end there. The governor of the Nizhny Novgorod region decided that this wasn't a catastrophe at all, but on the contrary, a reason to celebrate.
I'd like to address the guests of our city, the tourists, and ask them to be understanding about this, to treat it as a wellness procedure, a kind of detox, right? Really? After all, we still have internet, but it's available through wired channels and Wi-Fi, and we will be expanding the number of Wi-Fi hotspots.
Valentina Matvienko, a representative of the upper echelons of the clan that has long since stopped hiding its cannibalistic instincts, flew to Switzerland, not to a bomb shelter, not to the ruins of Mariupol, but to a cozy, neutral, and clean country. Why? To talk about the peace that Russia supposedly brings to Ukraine.
Russia was forced to intervene in order to stop this bloodshed, to stop the killing of innocent people.
Political analyst Solonikov stated that the so-called liberation of Chasiv Yar is a significant achievement and a great victory. Apparently, for those who consider a city destroyed to the ground an object of pride, such words are the norm.
Chasiv Yar is a settlement that has long been well known. Its name is now widely and truly recognized far beyond the immediate line of contact. And that is precisely why it genuinely sounds incredibly proud and will undoubtedly have a profoundly significant impact, both among those brave individuals who are actively fighting on the front lines and among those who are diligently following our courageous guys as they steadily advance. This is truly a remarkably significant achievement, a truly major and decisive victory.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching until the end. Please like, subscribe and support us with a comment, telling us where you are watching from. It means a lot to us. See you soon. Glory to Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.